Right fellas, a couple of videos ago I changed the interior in this Sapphire Cosworth from leather to cloth. One of the best things I've done to the full car. Second best thing was probably putting these old school wheels on, but over the moon, put the cloth in, it was absolutely beautiful. Smelled amazing because I proper wet back the seats, just got the seats absolutely spotless. When I'd finished putting the interior in, I took the car out for a drive, just me and my girlfriend, beautiful day, loving life. We'd been for some dinner, and on the way back, the car just cut out. I knew exactly what it was. There's a problem with the fuel pump wiring. Absolutely happens on just about all Cosworths. I've done the Loom on the 3-door Cosworth when I restored the underside, because I knew these Looms go bad, and when they go bad, the engine can run lean and it'll melt pistons. And it was always on my list of jobs to do to change the Loom on the SAF. Or fortunately or unfortunately, whichever way you look at it, the SAF has provided me the opportunity to do it now. That's the problem. The fuel pump Loom has failed. Very common on the Sapphire, on the all Cosworth, to be honest. And thanks to the lads at Auto Dynamics who keep these cars on the road, we have a brand new fuel pump Loom. Now these aren't expensive, and I'll be honest, they're not even that hard to fit. Like I say, I have done one on my 3-door. It's just, if you haven't done it before, it's probably a bit daunting, but I'll show you just how easy it is in this video. But the Sapphire at the minute, I'll show you the problem. So to get the car home, I got rescued by my mate Chris Thompson in his AA van, and this is the wiring we used to get the car home. I didn't actually get it towed. We managed to wire up the fuel pump to a permanent live. I was trying to fix the car, and all the fuel pump wiring is behind the dash, like the fuse and the relay. I thought it might have been a fuse, but it wasn't. So at the minute, if I get the keys and we try and start the car, put them in, check it's in neutral. I don't want to go flying about my garage. So the fuel pump there hasn't primed, but if we crank it, I'm just going to check it's in neutral again. Maybe we want to put the handbrake on just to prevent any damage. We'll try and fire it. Right, so it's not firing. So if we look under the car, these wires here are connected to the fuel pump. This is what we used to get the car home. This went to the battery, so obviously the pump was just running permanent till we got the car home. It was about 2 mile, easy drive. So on a Sierra Cosworth fuel pump, there's 2 wires. There's a positive, then there's a negative / earth. And if we take the wires were added to get the car home, we'll take the negative / earth wire and we'll strip the end and we'll connect it to a good earthing point on the car. Here we're using the boot lock, like the latch where the boot lock catches, and we'll give it a good earth. I think now this car should start. So that's the problem. It's got a dodgy earth. It's not the live wire that's the issue. It's the earth. I've got a bad earth somewhere. So I know what some of you are thinking. Adam, you fix the problem, put a new earth on the car, get out and drive it. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to put a new fuel pump Loom. This is the best way of future-proofing the car. Like, I could put a new earth on, but if it comes off or something happens and I lose my fuel pump and I've got my foot down, I might melt the piston and it'll cost us thousands. So for the sake of 50, I think these are £60 from Auto Dynamics, I'll leave a link below. I've got full confidence in the fuel pump wiring Loom in the future. Now you can see under the bonnet the car is already fitted with an aftermarket fan Loom, and we're going to add an aftermarket fuel pump Loom which will go just here. It connects to the battery, then all you do is you run it through the car, like along your bottom scuttle panel thing here, in the boot, out the boot to your fuel pump. And before we do anything, the first job we're going to do is remove the battery from the car, or at least disconnect it so we don't short anything out and cause any more issues in the future. So the first job, it says, fit the relay and fuse box holder to your desired location and remove the fuse for its safety. So one thing I hate doing, fellas, is drilling holes in cars to fit things. So I'm going to look for a hole that's already there where I can fit this fuel pump Loom. And I think this one on the bulkhead will do absolutely spot on. So one thing I hate doing when I'm doing jobs on my car is reusing old bolts. So I'm going to get a brand new M6 zinc plated bolt to fix this fuel pump relay to the bulkhead of the SAF. So there is the fuel pump relay and fuse held securely to the car. So the next job on the instructions is to run the wiring Loom, all this, through the car. It says it's designed to go through the original grommet next to the battery. So let's get it through there and see if we can get it on the inside of the dash. So the first thing I'm going to do is put a bit of WD-40 on the grommet, what we need to get the wiring through, and I'm going to actually pull it out the bulkhead so I can see how big the grommet is and how much space I've got to work with. And to make the job easier, I did remove a bit of the bottom half of the dash. Once that bottom half of the dash was out, I could then use my torch to poke it through the hole where the grommet is and see exactly on the inside of the car where the wiring was going to come through what we need to feed to the back of the car to the fuel pump. So once we know where the wiring's going through, I'm going to give it a quick squirt with some WD-40 to help the wiring squeeze through the grommet. And to save damaging these connections, I'm going to get some duct tape around the connections so we don't damage anything. And hopefully that end will just slide straight through the grommet. So thanks to the magical powers of WD-40, the wiring has gone through the grommet absolutely perfectly. So it's just a case of going inside the car and seeing if we can find the end of the wire and hope it hasn't scribbled up behind the dashboard somewhere. And let's see if the loom's here. Oh, it's even on the floor, look. Yes! Once the wiring is through the bulkhead, all you've got to do is get the end and give it a good pull. Pull the rest of the wiring through the bulkhead so you've got enough wiring to go to the back to the fuel pump. So there is all the loom through. We've got our relay and fuse here, and we've got our positive and negative here. And what we'll do is, we'll check it's all working and we'll tidy all this up. But before we get it tidying the battery area up, we'll need to get the rest of the wiring in. So it's just a case of removing all the plastic coverings that go from the front of the car to the back that's held in place with some Phillips screws. And the reason we're doing this is we're going to put the wiring under these plastic trims so it's not obviously hanging down by your feet, and it gets it nice and neat and out the way. Once we've got the wiring to the back of the car, it's just a case of pulling through the boot floor and pulling it all the way down to the fuel pump. Then at the fuel pump we'll remove the temporary wires were fitted when the car broke down, and we'll remove the original wires from the original wiring loom. So here is the original Ford fuel pump wiring loom, and here is the new wiring loom from Auto Dynamics. It's all wired through. Now what we need to do is we need to take this blue wire from the new loom and attach it to the live wire on the old loom, which acts as a trigger for the new loom. And to do this job we're going to need a few electrical essential tools. So for this brown wire, which we don't need, we'll snip the end off and we'll put a little bit of heat shrink on the end. So the reason I'm putting the heat shrink on the end of the wire is to seal the end of the wire up. We'll nip the end of that heat shrink up because we don't need that. This one we're going to use as a trigger for the new fuel pump loom. So we'll snip the end off. Then with my wire snippers, we'll remove the sheeting from the outside of the wire. Then we'll snip off what we don't need of this blue wire. Then we'll fire up this soldering iron. Then we'll tin the wire on the new loom, tin the wire on the old loom, then I'll do my best to solder them together. Then once they're soldered together, we'll put a bit of heat shrink on and make a nice neat job. We'll melt that. So this is the hardest part of doing this loom. So what I've done is, off the original loom, I've chopped the negative, sealed it so it's all weatherproof. I've also chopped the positive and joined it into the new loom, which will act as a trigger for this end, which goes to the pump. Now as always, when I do a job I get a bit carried away with my heat shrink, but by the end it looks spot on, nice and neat, nice and weatherproof, perfect for the future. Once I was finished playing with my heat shrink, it's then just a case of rewiring the fuel pump with the new loom from Auto Dynamics. The connectors are held in place with two small nuts. So let's start by reattaching the battery with the new fuel pump loom still unattached. Let's now attach the new fuel pump wiring loom, but the fuse is still missing out the loom, so it's not going to really do anything yet. Now as with everything electrical, I do take my time. So I've got the new loom connected to the fuel pump. Now we've got it connected to the battery, but it's still not getting any power. There's still no ignition on the car, and there's still no fuse in the new loom. But once the battery is connected, we'll put the fuse in, what we took out at the beginning. Then it's just a case of putting the key in and hopefully the car will start. here comes the moment of truth. I've got the key. Let's put in the ignition. What we're going to listen for first is the fuel pump priming. Check it's in neutral. I didn't leave it there. I've done something wrong. Let's try and crank it. Fixed it. I hear the fuel pump buzzing there. So while it's running, I'm going to quickly check we're getting 12 volts to the fuel pump. You need a minimum of 12 volts at your pump. And as you can see, we are getting 12.7 volts to the pump, which is absolutely perfect. I'm over the moon with that. Right fellas, we're getting plenty of voltage to the pump, so that is a job done. The only thing left to do is to quickly build up the interior, put all the side trims back on and get the dashboard looking the way it was before we started this job. Putting the interior back together isn't that hard. It's just screws mainly. Taking your time, getting everything back the way it was, getting everything in its place, and just try not to break anything, because these parts are hard to get hold of now. And the final piece of the dashboard is to put the ECU cover on. Then there we have it, a brand new fuel pump wiring loom fitted to my Saph. It looks absolutely spot on and I'm over the moon with it. The only thing to do now is to go out for a drive and check it's all working. Right fellas, there's the car fixed as it was before it broke down. It is running spot on, no spluttering, no misfires, nothing like that. We're getting plenty of voltage to the pump, so I don't need to worry at all about the fueling. Well, I do actually probably need to get the car on a rolling road and get the fueling checked to the engine, but the fuel pump I know is good from now on. I don't need to worry about that. If you are interested in a new fuel pump loom for your car, I'll leave a link to the lads at Auto Dynamics in the description of this video. But yet again fellas, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video and I'll catch you on the next one. Cheers.